My dad shoved my gift off the anniversary table, like it was trash, and in that split second, I realized I'd been erased from my own family. The box hit the hardwood with a thud so loud it felt like it cracked something inside my chest. And that's when I stopped being the quiet daughter. That's when I decided I wasn't leaving empty-handed. Let me rewind. My name is Lena Harper. I'm 32. ICU nurse, Denver, Colorado. I drink too much cold brew and not enough water. I haven't lived in my hometown of Maplewood, Indiana in almost 6 years, but that night, my parents' 40th anniversary, I walked back into that house like a ghost who finally decided to haunt. The house looked exactly the same, beige siding, American flag on the porch, the same crack in the driveway my dad always swore he'd fix. Next spring, there were balloons tied to the mailbox, a banner across the porch that read 40 years of love, Tom and Carol Harper inside, 60 people, neighbors, church friends, my cousin's boyfriend who nobody likes but everyone tolerates. The same folding chairs from First Baptist. And at the head of the table, holding a champagne flute like she'd won an Oscar, my older sister, Madison Harper, golden child, homecoming queen. Dad's legacy. She was mid-toast when I walked in. And I'm just grateful I could take care of you both. Especially with the house. You've sacrificed so much. It was my turn. Applause. My father beamed at her like she hung the moon. I stood there holding a gold-wrapped box that had cost me 5 years of my life. Nobody clapped for me. Mrs. Donnelly from across the street spotted me first. Lena, oh my word. The room shifted. Forks paused. Heads turned. My mother's smile collapsed. And my dad? He didn't even try to hide it. We didn't invite you, he said flatly. Not quiet, not private. Public, like a verdict. You have to understand something. I didn't leave Indiana because I hated them. I left because I was disappearing. Madison filled every room like fireworks. I was background music. Dad used to joke at BBQs. Madison got the brains and the personality. Lena, well, Lena's Lena. People laughed. I laughed too. What else do you do at 16? After nursing school, I packed 2 suitcases and drove west. Denver felt like oxygen. For the first time, nobody compared me to anyone. I called home every Sunday at 7 p.m. like clockwork. By year 2, the calls went to voicemail. By year 3, Madison started answering for them. They're busy. Dad's tired. Mom doesn't like drama. Drama. Like I was a storm system hovering offshore. 5 years ago, I found out my parents were about to lose their house. Foreclosure. 3 months behind. I found out from my Aunt Diane, not from them. I called the bank the same night. The branch manager, Greg Wallace, told me something that made my stomach drop. Another family member called last week, he said. Said they'd handle it, but no payment ever came through. I knew exactly who that was. Madison had promised. Madison had not paid, so I did. $250 a month. Auto draft. Anonymous. For 5 years. No vacations. No new car. I worked double shifts in the ICU while other nurses posted beach selfies. My boyfriend Caleb fixed our own plumbing so we wouldn't hire anyone. Every month, that payment left my account. Every month, the house on Birchwood Drive stayed standing. My parents never called. But at Thanksgiving, Dad apparently toasted Madison for saving the family home. She let him. Back to the party. The music was playing some old Shania Twain track. Cake sweating under fluorescent lights. Madison walked toward me like she was approaching a wild animal. What are you doing here? She hissed. I brought a gift. You should leave. I stepped around her. I'm their daughter. Dad's jaw tightened. You disappear for years and show up with a box, he said. Your sister's the one who's been here. She paid for this house. The room nodded. Of course they did. Madison stood behind him, arms folded, calm, calculated. And that's when he shoved it. My box. Gold paper flashing under the light. Sliding across white tablecloth. Falling. The corner tore open. Gasps. We don't want anything from someone who abandoned us, he said. Abandoned. Like the 5 years of invisible payments didn't exist. Like I hadn't quietly held up their roof while they slept. I bent down slowly. Picked up the box. Smoothed the torn corner with my thumb. My hands were steady, my heart was not. I didn't abandon you, I said quietly. I just stopped begging to be seen. No one moved. 60 people pretending not to stare. Madison's lips pressed tight. She thought she'd won. And for a second, just one, I almost walked out with the box. Almost. But then I saw Aunt Diane near the kitchen doorway. She knew. She'd known the truth for years. Our eyes met, and something in me shifted. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. I walked toward her and placed the box in her hands. Hold on to this, I whispered. Her grip tightened. Are you sure? Yes. Then I turned toward the door. Behind me, I heard my mother whisper my name. Soft. Too late. I drove back toward Indianapolis that night, shaking so hard I had to pull over twice. Caleb met me at the airport when I flew home the next morning. He didn't ask how it went. He saw my face. Just wrapped me in his hoodie and drove us home. I turned my phone off. Didn't want to see their names. Didn't want to hear apologies. Because I knew something they didn't. The box wasn't gone. It was still sitting in that house. And inside it, 5 years of truth, 5 years of receipts. 5 years of a lie waiting to detonate. I didn't know exactly when it would happen. But I knew this, when my aunt opened that box in front of 60 people. Everything Madison built was going to burn. And my father, he was about to realize the daughter he called, one less mouth to feed, had been the only one feeding the house. The moment my aunt said, "Before anyone eats cake, you need to see this," my sister's smile finally cracked. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but I know every detail. Because small towns don't keep secrets, and because Aunt Diane does not miss. The music was still playing when I walked out. People were trying to recover. You know that awkward, Midwest thing where everyone pretends nothing just happened. Forks scraping plates. Fake laughter. Someone saying, "So anyway." Madison clapped her hands together like she was resetting the vibe. "Okay everybody, let's not let this ruin Mom and Dad's night. Who wants cake?" My dad nodded stiffly. My mom sat there frozen. And Aunt Diane, she didn't move. She was standing near the door, holding my gold-wrapped box like it was radioactive. She told me later she felt like she was holding a grenade with the pin already halfway out. She walked back to the table. Set the box down. The same table my dad had shoved it from. "Before anyone touches that cake," she said, loud and clear, "we need to open this." The room stilled. Not quiet. Still. My dad stood up. "Diane, don't start." "I'm not starting anything, Tom," she said calmly. "I'm finishing something." Madison stepped forward fast. Too fast. "This isn't the time." "Oh honey," Aunt Diane said, her voice turning razor thin, "this is exactly the time." She tore the gold paper open. No ceremony. Just rip. Inside was the thick manila envelope from First National Bank of Maplewood. My dad recognized the logo immediately. I'm told the color drained from his face before she even spoke. She pulled out the official certificate first. Held it up. Mortgage satisfaction statement, she read clearly. Property 8014 Birchwood Drive. Paid in full. A murmur. She continued. Paid off as of September 14th by Lena Harper. Silence. Real silence. The kind that makes your ears ring. Madison laughed. Actually laughed. "That can't be right," she said. "There must be some mistake." Aunt Diane didn't look at her. She flipped the page. Total paid over 5 years, 129,000 and change. Monthly transfers of $2,150 from Lena Harper's account in Denver, Colorado. She pulled out the stack of statements. All 60 of them. My name printed on every line, date after date, month after month. 5 Christmases, 5 birthdays, 5 Thanksgivings I wasn't invited to, each one stamped pied. From me. My dad sank back into his chair. Slow, like someone had unplugged him. My mom covered her mouth with both hands. Madison's voice changed. "You can hear when someone's confidence fractures." "I helped," she said quickly. "I handled the paperwork. I talked to the bank." "No," Aunt Diane replied. "You called once and promised payment. Then you never followed through." Every head in the room turned toward Madison. Neighbors, cousins, church friends, 60 witnesses. Uncle Rick muttered, "You said you were paying it." Madison's eyes darted. Cornered animals have a certain look. She tried one more move. "You don't understand," she said. Lena left. I was the one who stayed. I deserved. Deserved what? Aunt Diane cut in. Credit. My dad finally spoke. His voice was low. "You told me you were covering it." Madison didn't answer. Because there was no version of the story left to twist. The proof was paper, and paper doesn't blink. Then Aunt Diane opened the letter. The one I'd rewritten 4 times. She read the first line. Mom and Dad, I know you think I left because I didn't care. But I left because staying meant disappearing. My mother started crying immediately. Not pretty crying. Not soft tears, the kind that shake your shoulders. Diane kept reading. I never wanted applause. I just wanted you safe. This house was your dream. I couldn't let it be taken. A pause. I love you. Even when you don't see me. She folded the letter carefully and placed it on the table in front of my dad. No one touched the cake. The frosting started to melt under the lights. The banner hung crooked. People began gathering their purses and jackets quietly. You know that feeling when a room knows it witnessed something historic. Like nobody wanted to say the wrong thing, because the weight of it was too heavy. My dad stared at the statements for a long time. Ran his finger down the columns. Month by month. His daughter's name repeating like a pulse he'd ignored. My mom whispered. She came all this way. And that's when it hit him. He'd pushed it off the table. In front of everyone. Madison disappeared, slipped out the back door. Nobody followed her. Nobody stopped her. Because the room had already decided. In a town of 8,000 people, reputation is oxygen, and hers had just run out. Around 10:30 p.m., my dad picked up his phone. He called me. I watched it ring while sitting in my dark living room in Denver. Tom Harper. I didn't answer. He called again. Voicemail. My mom tried next. Carol Harper. Voicemail. Not to punish them, not to be cruel, but because I wasn't ready to hear regret from the same voice that called me. One less mouth. After the last guest left, my parents sat alone at the table, cake untouched, music off, paper plates scattered like debris. My mom kept her hand on my letter, like if she lifted it, I'd disappear again. My dad read every single statement. All 60. Aunt Diane said he looked like a man realizing the hero of his story had never been who he thought. Around midnight, he said quietly. I threw it on the floor. My mom whispered. You threw her heart on the floor. And for the first time in her marriage, she heard him cry. At 3 a.m., my dad backed his truck out of the driveway. My mom climbed in with the box. Rewrapped. They didn't call. Didn't text. They just drove. 14 hours, Indiana to Colorado, no sleep. Just highway and regret. Meanwhile, I was on my couch in Denver, staring at nothing. Caleb brought me tea. Sat beside me. Didn't say, I told you so. Didn't say, they don't deserve you. Just stayed. Around 6:07 a.m., I heard a truck pull up outside. I wasn't expecting anyone, but something in my chest tightened anyway. I stepped onto my porch in sweatpants and bare feet. And there they were. My parents. 14 hours of driving written all over their faces. My mom holding the gold box like it was fragile. My dad standing at the end of my walkway like he wasn't sure he had the right to move forward. He looked smaller. Older. Human?
I'm sorry,
He said. 3 words. The 3 words he'd never once said to me growing up. But here's the part nobody talks about. An apology doesn't erase 5 years. It doesn't rewind silence. It doesn't glue dignity back together. It just opens a door. And I had to decide whether to let them step through it. I stood there, coffee in hand, heart steady for the first time in years. And I realized something, I wasn't the invisible one anymore. Now they were the ones asking to be seen, and I hadn't even decided if I was ready. When my father asked, "Can I hug you?" I didn't move. Not because I didn't care, but because for the first time in my life, I had the power to decide. They were still standing at the end of my walkway when I said it. Come inside. No warmth, no coldness. Just neutral. My mom climbed the porch steps first, still clutching that rewrapped gold box like it was something holy. My dad followed slower, like every step cost him pride. Inside, my house smelled like coffee and cedarwood cleaner. Caleb had already disappeared into the garage. He knew this wasn't his battlefield. I didn't hug them. I didn't cry. I went to the kitchen, put the kettle on, pulled 3 mugs from the cabinet. Because I've spent my entire adult life holding chaos steady with routine. And right then, routine was the only thing keeping me upright. They sat at my small oak table. The one I bought at an estate sale for $40. while morning light stretched across the floor between us like a line nobody knew how to cross. My dad cleared his throat. I don't know where to start. I leaned back in my chair. Try the truth. He nodded slowly. I believed what I wanted to believe. He said, Madison was here. You weren't. It was easier to think she was carrying us. Easier. That word almost made me laugh. It was easier to assume I didn't care than to ask. Easier to praise the loud daughter than notice the quiet one. My mom finally spoke. I knew something didn't add up, she whispered. The bank statements never came through the house. Madison said she handled everything online. I told myself not to question it. Why? I asked gently. Her eyes filled again. Because questioning her meant admitting I might have been wrong about you. There it was. Not cruelty. Cowardice. Fear. They hadn't hated me. They'd just chosen the version of the story that didn't challenge their pride. My dad slid the gold box across the table toward me. We brought it back, he said quietly. I didn't touch it. You already opened it. His jaw tightened. I shouldn't have pushed it? No. I said calmly, you shouldn't have. Silence settled heavy. Outside, a neighbor started a lawnmower. Life moving on while we dissected ours. Then he said something that shifted the air. I was angry when you left. That caught me off guard. Why? You didn't ask for permission, he admitted. You just went. I felt like you were saying this town wasn't good enough. That we weren't. There it was. Not abandonment. Wounded ego. I leaned forward. I left because every time I stayed, I shrank. He looked up, actually looked at me. For 16 years I heard how Madison was the star. I continued. And I was background. When I got into nursing school you said, that's practical. When she got into marketing you threw a party. He flinched. I didn't know you felt that way. You didn't ask. My mom started crying again. Soft this time. Not dramatic. Just regret leaking out slowly. I read your letter 3 times last night, she said. I kept thinking about you sitting alone in Denver sending that money. We never even thanked you for Christmas gifts. I smiled faintly. You didn't even open some of them. She winced. I thought Madison had told you we called. Of course she had. Madison had built an entire narrative around my absence. And they'd let her. Then my dad asked it. Can I hug you? He didn't stand. Didn't reach. Just asked. And that question mattered more than the hug. Because my whole childhood, affection wasn't requested. It was assumed. I stood slowly. Walked around the table. Let him wrap his arms around me. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't forgiveness. It was possibility. I pulled back first. I'm not going back to how it was, I said firmly. He nodded immediately. We know? No, I corrected gently. I need you to hear it. I love you. But I won't compete with my sister for oxygen anymore. My mom grabbed my hand. You won't have to. We'd see. They stayed 3 hours. We talked about logistics too. Dad had already removed Madison from the bank accounts. They were meeting an attorney to review anything she'd touched financially. Small-town reputations move fast. Apparently half of Maplewood knew by Sunday morning. Church friends stopped inviting Madison to brunch. Neighbors stopped waving. Silence is a verdict in places like that. Madison sent a family group text blaming Aunt Diane, calling herself the victim. No one replied. Not even Dad. That might have been the loudest statement of all. Before they left, I set boundaries. Clear ones. I need consistency, I said. Call me because you want to. Not because you're scared of losing me again. Dad nodded. Every Sunday, he said. Don't promise if you can't keep it. I will. And if you ever have questions about me, I added, ask me. Not Madison, not anyone else. Mom squeezed my fingers. We will. When they finally walked back to the truck, my dad turned once more. Lena? Yeah. I'm proud of you. The words landed differently this time. Not performative, not comparative, just mine. I watched them drive away, and I didn't cry. Because something fundamental had shifted. For the first time, I hadn't begged to be understood. I had required it. That night, Caleb found me sitting on the porch. So? He asked softly. I don't know yet. I admitted. But it feels different. He nodded. You didn't fight to be chosen, he said. You just showed them who you are. Exactly. I stopped auditioning for love. And that changed everything. But here's what nobody prepares you for. Healing isn't clean. And redemption doesn't automatically rewrite history, because even though my parents were trying, Madison was not done. 3 weeks later, she showed up in Denver. Unannounced, standing on my porch. Crying. And what she said next. That's when I realized the mortgage lie was just the beginning. 3 weeks after my parents drove 14 hours to apologize, my sister showed up at my door crying. And what she said made everything uglier than the mortgage ever did. It was a Thursday. I remember because Thursdays are my long shift days at the hospital. I'd just gotten home from the ICU. 12 hours of alarms, ventilators, and families praying in hallways. I was exhausted. Caleb was in the garage building a bookshelf for a neighbor. The house smelled like sawdust and leftover pasta, and then the doorbell rang. I almost didn't answer. Something in my chest told me I should. When I opened the door, Madison was standing there. No makeup, hair pulled back messy. Mascara smudged like she'd either cried for hours or wanted it to look like she had. She looked smaller than I remembered. But her eyes, still calculating. She said. Just that. Like we'd run into each other at Target. I crossed my arms. How did you get my address? Mom gave it to me. Of course she did. What do you want, Madison? Her lip trembled. I need to talk to you. We stood there for a full 10 seconds. Wind moving through the trees. A car driving past. Normal life continuing while my past stood on my porch. I'm not here to fight, she said. Good, I replied. Because I'm not fighting for scraps anymore. That hit her. She swallowed. I messed up. Understatement of the decade. I stepped aside. 1 hour, I said. That's what I have. She walked in slowly, glancing around my house like she was scanning for proof of something. You did well for yourself? She muttered. I didn't answer. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one my parents had cried at. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. She started with tears. I never meant for it to go that far. I leaned back. You mean 5 years? She flinched. I called the bank because Dad was panicking. I wanted to look like I had control. Like I could fix it. And when you couldn't. She hesitated. I thought you wouldn't step in. That stopped me. What? You left, she said, voice sharp now. You moved to Colorado. You built a life. I figured you were done with us. So you decided to let them lose the house. No, she snapped. I thought they'd refinance or something. I didn't think. You didn't think. I cut in. Silence. Her breathing got heavier. Then the payments started coming. She admitted quietly. I felt something cold slide down my spine. You knew. She nodded. After the 3rd month, I figured it out. How? I still had access to Dad's online banking. I saw the deposits. I saw your name. 5 years. She knew. Every single month, and she let them thank her anyway. Why? I asked, and my voice wasn't angry. It was tired. She looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time in my life, Madison didn't look superior. She looked insecure. Because for once, she whispered, I was the hero. There it was. Not greed, not money, validation. I grew up being the one who had to shine, she continued. You were quiet. Easy. Nobody expected anything from you. I had to win. I laughed softly. You think being invisible is easy? Her eyes flickered. You left, she repeated. I left because staying meant competing with you for basic acknowledgement. Her jaw tightened. You always played the martyr. I didn't play anything, I said calmly. I just stopped trying to beat you. That landed hard. She wiped her eyes. When the town found out, they stopped calling me. Church women who've known me since kindergarten won't look at me. That's consequences. I lost my job, she said suddenly. That surprised me. What? My boss saw the Facebook posts, said it reflected poorly on the company. Small towns and social media. Brutal combo. I'm not saying you deserved that, I said carefully. But you built your reputation on something that wasn't yours. Her voice turned desperate. You could fix this. I blinked. How exactly? Tell people you wanted me to take the credit. Say it was a misunderstanding. That we both helped. There it was, The real reason she drove 14 hours. Not guilt. Damage control. I actually felt something shift inside me then. Not anger. Clarity. You want me to lie? I said slowly. I want my life back. You mean the version built on mine? She slammed her hand lightly on the table. I was here. I took them to doctor's appointments. I handled their insurance. I was present. And I paid their mortgage. The air went still. She looked away first. For a moment, I saw her not as my rival, but as someone terrified of being ordinary. You could have told them the truth, I said gently. You could have said we were both helping. She shook her head. They already thought you abandoned them. So you let them keep thinking that. Her silence was answer enough. Then she said something that stunned me. I was scared you'd come back. I blinked. Why? Because if you did, I wouldn't be special anymore. There it was. The real fracture. Madison wasn't protecting our parents. She was protecting her identity. And my existence threatened it. We sat there in the quiet hum of my refrigerator. Two sisters, one truth. Years of competition finally named out loud. I'm not fixing this for you, I said calmly. Her head snapped up. You're just going to let everyone think I'm a liar. You are a liar. Tears streamed down her face. You're ruining my life. No, I replied steadily. You gambled with mine. She stood abruptly. I never thought you'd choose pride over family. I almost laughed again. This isn't pride, I said. It's boundaries. She walked toward the door, paused, turned back. Do you forgive me? The question hung there, heavy, honest. For once, I don't know yet, I said truthfully. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. Her shoulders slumped. She left without slamming the door. That felt significant. Caleb came in a minute later. She gone? Yeah. He studied my face. You okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. Actually, yeah. Because something had finally shifted. For years, Madison had been the narrator of my story. The loud one. The visible one. The chosen one. But sitting at that table, I realized something powerful. She needed the spotlight. I didn't. I needed peace. And those are very different currencies. Peace doesn't mean the story ends. Because the next call I got was from my father. And what he told me about Madison's lawyer changed everything again. When my dad said, Madison's talking to a lawyer, my stomach dropped because betrayal is one thing but legal threats, that's war. It was Sunday, 7:02 p.m. He was 2 minutes late. Which, ironically, proved he was serious about keeping his promise. Ever since that morning on my porch, my dad had called every Sunday like clockwork. Sometimes it was awkward. Sometimes it was small talk about the Colts or the weather in Indiana. But he called. This time, his voice wasn't steady. Lena, he said. There's something you need to know. That sentence again. I braced. She's claiming financial coercion. I blinked. I'm sorry. What? Madison met with an attorney in Indianapolis. He continued. She's saying you paid the mortgage as leverage. That you did it to embarrass her. That you manipulated the family dynamic. For a second, I couldn't even process it. Leverage. Manipulated. I worked double shifts in an ICU while she soaked up applause. And now I was the villain. You've got to be kidding me? I said quietly. I wish I was. Here's what you need to understand about small-town pride. When Madison lost her reputation, she didn't just lose social invitations. She lost identity. And identity, when threatened, makes people dangerous. She's saying you never told us because you wanted a dramatic reveal. Dad continued. That it was intentional. I laughed once. Sharp. If I wanted drama, I would have exposed her 5 years ago. I know that, he said quickly. Your mother knows that. But she's looking for a way to protect herself. Translation, she's scrambling. Apparently. Madison's lawyer suggested she might have grounds to argue. Shared financial management confusion. That she had been acting as intermediary and therefore deserved partial recognition. Even now. My head spun. She knew I was paying? I said. She admitted it to me. There was a pause on the line. You saw her? Dad asked.
Yeah.
Another silence. Why didn't you tell us? Because I'm not playing referee between you and your other daughter. He exhaled slowly. She says you refuse to help her clear her name. I leaned back against my couch. She asked me to lie, I said plainly. Dad didn't respond immediately. Then, very quietly, she's always been afraid of losing. That was the closest he'd ever come to acknowledging the dynamic. That night after the call, Caleb found me sitting on the porch again. She threatening you? He asked, not directly. But she's circling. He nodded slowly. You have proof, he said. You've got bank statements, timestamps, notarized documents. Truth wins in court. I looked out at the Denver skyline glowing in the distance. Sometimes it doesn't, I murmured. Because here's the thing about family disputes. Winning legally can still mean losing emotionally. If Madison pushed this far enough, there would be no repairing it. None. 2 days later, I got an email. Subject line, request for clarification. Harper mortgage payments. Attached was a formal letter from a law firm. Polite language. Neutral tone. But the implication was clear. Madison was exploring her financial contributions and wanted documentation of my intent in paying the mortgage. Intent. Like generosity needed justification. I read it twice. Then forwarded it to a lawyer friend at the hospital whose husband specialized in property law. His response came an hour later. She has no case. 0. But respond carefully. Don't inflame it. Don't inflame it. I almost laughed. 5 years of silence. Public humiliation. And now this. That night I called my parents. Both of them on speaker. I'm not suing her, I said immediately. We know, Mom said quickly. But I'm also not rewriting history. Dad's voice was steady this time. We're not backing her. That mattered. More than I expected. I need you to understand something. I continued. If she turns this into a legal fight, I will defend myself. Fully. You should, Dad said, and there was something in his tone I hadn't heard before. Not authority. Alignment. Then Mom surprised me. She's scared, she said softly. She built her whole life around being the one who holds everything together. And now? I asked. She doesn't know who she is. That almost broke my anger. Almost. Because fear explains behavior. It doesn't excuse it. 3 days later, Madison called me. No tears this time. No porch ambush. Just a straight, sharp tone. Are you really going to make this ugly? I didn't raise my voice. You already did. I was trying to protect myself. By accusing me. She hesitated. By surviving. That word again. Survival. Like we'd been in combat. Madison, I said slowly, I never wanted to compete with you. You always did. No, I replied. You just needed to believe that. Silence. Then, you could have told them from the start. Maybe. I admitted. But I didn't want gratitude. I wanted them safe. And I wanted to matter. She shot back. There it was, raw, honest, painful. For the first time in the conversation her voice cracked, not performative, not strategic. Real. Do you have any idea what it's like? She said. To feel like if you're not exceptional, you're nothing. I inhaled slowly. Yes, I said, I do. That landed harder than any accusation. Because we'd grown up in the same house. Under the same expectations. We just adapted differently. She performed. I disappeared. I'm not fighting you in court, I said finally. But I'm not lying either. So that's it, she whispered. That's boundaries. A long pause. Then quietly, I don't know how to exist without being the favorite. And that was the most honest thing she'd ever said to me. The legal letter never escalated. Maybe her lawyer told her the same thing mine did. No case, but something had changed. The threat had forced the final truth into daylight. This wasn't about money. It wasn't even about the house. It was about identity, and what happens when the story you've told about yourself collapses. A week later, Dad called with an update. She dropped it, he said. Completely? Completely. I exhaled slowly. But relief didn't flood in, because even without a lawsuit, there were still fractures, and fractures don't disappear just because paperwork does. That Sunday night, after the call, Caleb asked me something I hadn't let myself consider. Do you actually want her in your life? The question hit differently than all the others. Because forgiveness is one thing. Re-entry is another. I stared at the city lights. I don't know, I said honestly. And that was the first time I admitted it out loud. But I was about to find out, because 2 months later, Christmas came. And my parents insisted on one thing. Everyone at the same table. Including Madison. The first time I saw my sister after the legal threat, we were passing mashed potatoes across my kitchen table. And nobody knew if the night would end in forgiveness. Or another fracture. My parents flew to Denver 3 days before Christmas. Dad still hates flying. He texted me from the gate like he was heading into battle. Mom brought homemade sugar cookies wrapped in enough bubble wrap to survive a tornado. They were trying. I'll give them that. And then Mom said it. Madison's coming. Not asking, telling. She booked a flight yesterday. I felt that old tension press against my ribs. Did she ask if I was okay with that? Mom hesitated. She said she didn't want another year divided. Translation: she didn't want to be alone in Indiana on Christmas. Christmas Eve arrived sharp and cold. Snow dusted the sidewalks like powdered sugar. My house smelled like cinnamon candles and roasted turkey. Caleb had strung white lights across the porch. Soft, calm, nothing flashy. At 5:12 p.m., a rental car pulled up. Madison stepped out wearing a long wool coat and a guarded expression. No grand entrance. No tears. Just cautious. She knocked. Which, for us, felt symbolic. I opened the door. Hi, she said. Hi. We stood there for a second too long. Then I stepped aside. Come in. Dinner started stiff. Dad carved the turkey with unnecessary focus. Mom explained every side dish like narration could fill silence. Madison and I avoided eye contact for the first 15 minutes. Small talk. Weather, flights. Denver traffic. Then Caleb did something intentional. He raised his glass. I'm glad everyone's here, he said simply. No speeches. No references to the past. Just acknowledgement. It broke the ice enough for us to breathe. Halfway through dinner, Dad cleared his throat. I want to say something. Mom squeezed his hand under the table. He looked at both of us. I failed both of you. The words hung there. Madison froze. I stayed still. I compared you, he continued. I praise one of you louder. I didn't see the cost of that. Silence. Honest silence. He turned to Madison. I put too much weight on you being exceptional. Then to me. And I treated you like being steady wasn't extraordinary. That hit. Because that's exactly what it was. Steady. Consistent. Uncelebrated. Madison's eyes filled. I liked being the favorite. She admitted quietly. Nobody reacted. She kept going. I didn't know who I was without it. I watched her carefully. For performance, for manipulation, I didn't see it. Just vulnerability. Then she looked at me. I knew you were paying. There it was. Public. No more private confessions. I saw your name on the statements the 3rd month in. Mom gasped softly. Dad closed his eyes. And I let it keep happening, she said, because every time thanked me, I felt safe, not superior, not victorious, safe. Like losing the spotlight meant losing love. I'm sorry, she said, looking straight at me, not dramatic, not desperate, just direct, and something inside me softened, not erased, not healed, but shifted. I don't hate you, I said slowly. Her shoulders dropped an inch. But I'm not going back to competing. I don't want to compete anymore, she replied. You say that now, I said gently. But change isn't one dinner. She nodded. I know. That mattered. Because for the first time, she wasn't asking for a quick fix. Later, after plates were cleared and Caleb and Dad stepped outside to look at the snow, Madison and I stood alone in the kitchen. The hum of the dishwasher filled the space. I thought you'd use the money against me, she admitted. I never wanted power over you, I said. I just wanted them safe. She studied me like she was recalibrating something fundamental. I don't know how to not measure myself against you, she confessed. Then don't, I replied. Measure yourself against who you were yesterday. She gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. You always talk like that now. That's what therapy does. Her eyebrows shot up. You're in therapy. Yeah. For all this. For not shrinking myself. That landed differently. Christmas morning was quieter. Less tension, not perfect, but honest. We exchanged gifts. Madison gave me a framed photo of the house in Indiana, taken at sunset, peaceful and whole. On the back she'd written, "Thank you for keeping it standing." I swallowed hard. It wasn't public applause. It wasn't a speech. But it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's enough to start. When they flew back to Indiana 2 days later, something felt lighter. Not fixed, but moving. That Sunday at 7 p.m., Dad called again. Like clockwork. Consistency is louder than apologies. But here's the truth: nobody glamorizes healing is boring. It's weekly calls. It's awkward pauses. It's choosing not to reopen old wounds for dramatic effect. It's slow. And sometimes, slow feels unsatisfying, because there's no big cinematic finale. Just steady rebuilding. Until one more moment forced clarity. 6 months later, I got a call from the bank, not about the mortgage, about something Madison had done. And this time, it wasn't insecurity. It was intention, and I had to decide whether protecting my peace meant finally walking away for good. When the bank manager said, "Your name is listed as emergency contact on a new line of credit," my heart didn't race, it hardened. Because this time, it wasn't insecurity. It wasn't small town gossip. It was paperwork. And paperwork doesn't accidentally happen. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I'd just finished charting at the nurse's station when my phone buzzed. Unknown Indiana number. I almost declined it. Almost. "This is Mark Reynolds from First National Bank of Maplewood. Are you Lena Harper?" My stomach tightened. "Yes. I'm calling because your name was listed as a secondary contact reference on a recently opened business line of credit." A beat. For Madison Harper. The fluorescent lights above me suddenly felt too bright. "I didn't authorize anything," I said immediately. "We're not saying you did," he replied calmly. "But given the prior mortgage payoff history connected to your name, we thought it best to confirm." Prior mortgage payoff history. Translation: your sister's name still triggers flags. "What kind of credit line?" I asked. 85,000, for a marketing consultancy. $85,000. And she listed me, not as co-signer, but as credibility, as implied backing, like my financial history was collateral she could borrow socially. I stepped into the supply room for privacy. "Did she claim I was involved?" "She mentioned you've supported family financial matters in the past," he said carefully. My jaw clenched. Of course she did. She didn't ask me. She leveraged my history. Again, different strategy, same pattern. That night I called her. No waiting, no cooling off. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, why am I listed on your credit application?" Silence. Then, "It's just a reference. You used my name. It's not illegal. It's not ethical either." Her tone sharpened. I needed credibility. There are other ways to build that. Not fast enough. There it was again. Fast, immediate, urgent validation. "I thought we were rebuilding," I said quietly. "We are." "No," I corrected. "Rebuilding requires transparency." "It's just paperwork, Lena." "No, it's pattern." That word landed heavy. She went quiet. "Because she knew." "I didn't think you'd care," she muttered. I almost laughed. "You didn't think I'd care if my financial integrity was tied to an 85,000 risk. It's not like you're responsible for it." That's not the point. The point was simple. She still saw my stability as something she could tap into. Like an emotional savings account she had access to. Without asking. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "I didn't want you to say no." Honesty, again. But honesty after action. Not before. And that's the difference between growth and strategy. I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger. Decision. "You need to call the bank tomorrow and remove my name," I said evenly. She inhaled sharply. "It'll look bad." "Then let it. You're overreacting." "No," I said calmly. "I'm drawing a line." Silence stretched long enough that I could hear her breathing shift from defensive to uncertain. "You don't trust me," she whispered. I didn't answer immediately. Because trust isn't a switch. It's a ledger. And hers was still overdrawn. "I'm learning how much access you get to my life," I said finally. That hit harder than yelling ever could. The next morning, Mark Reynolds called back. "She requested removal of your name," he confirmed. Good. But that wasn't the point. The point was that it happened at all. That Sunday, 7 p.m., Dad called. I told him. There was a long pause. She said it wasn't a big deal. He admitted. It is, I said gently. Not because of the money, because of the pattern. He sighed deeply. I thought we were past this. So did I. That was the truth. And it hurt more than the original betrayal, because this time she knew better. Later that night, Madison texted me. I'm sorry. I'm still unlearning. That line could mean growth. Or it could mean excuse. Time would tell. Here's what therapy taught me: you can love someone and still limit their access. You can forgive someone and still protect your boundaries. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say isn't, I'm done. It's, this far. No further. A week later, Madison called again. Not to defend, not to justify, to ask. Would you meet me halfway? She said. Halfway where? Chicago? Neutral ground. I almost said no. Almost chose peace over possibility. But something in her voice sounded different. Less sharp. Less desperate. More grounded. I'll think about it, I said. Because this time, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing. And when I finally agreed to meet her, that conversation didn't end in tears. Or yelling. Or legal threats. It ended in something quieter. Something stronger. And something that finally broke the cycle. When I saw my sister sitting alone in that Chicago cafe, not performing, not posturing, just waiting, I realized this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about who I was willing to become. We met in Chicago because it felt neutral. Not Denver, my territory, not Indiana, hers. Neutral ground, like two countries negotiating peace after a quiet war. The cafe sat a few blocks from Millennium Park. Snow clung to the sidewalks. Wind cut between buildings like it always does in that city, sharp and unapologetic. She was already there when I walked in. No dramatic wave, no exaggerated smile, just nervous energy and a half-finished latte. For the first time in my life, Madison looked unsure of herself. And not in a manipulative way. In a human way. I sat down across from her. No hug, no cold shoulder, just presence. Thanks for coming, she said. I almost didn't. She nodded. I know. We let that sit. Because sometimes honesty needs space to land. I've been in therapy, she said suddenly. That caught me off guard. For what? For unraveling why I needed to be the favorite so badly. Her voice didn't crack, it didn't waver. It was steady. Different. My therapist asked me a question. She continued. She said, what happens if you're not special? I watched her carefully. And, I asked. I said, then I'm invisible. There it was. The core of it. All those years, we thought we were opposites. The loud one and the quiet one. But the truth, we were both terrified of disappearing. We just chose different survival tactics. I never wanted you to disappear, I said quietly. She looked up, but you needed to be the only one visible, I added. She nodded slowly. I thought love was limited, she admitted. Like if Dad was proud of you, there'd be less left for me. That hit deeper than anything else she'd said. Because it wasn't about money. Or reputation. It was about scarcity. We grew up in a house where praise felt like a spotlight. And spotlights only shine in one direction at a time. I don't hate you, she said softly. I don't hate you either. We sat there. Two grown women unpacking childhood narratives like fragile heirlooms. I know I don't get automatic trust, she continued. I know I have to rebuild it. Yes, I said plainly. And if you decide you don't want me in your life, I'll accept that. That was new. No guilt. No manipulation. Just accountability. And that's when I realized something. Forgiveness isn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It's about deciding the hurt doesn't get to run the future. I'm not cutting you out, I said finally. Her shoulders dropped. But, I continued, or relationship changes. She nodded immediately. I don't compete, I don't rescue. And I don't lend stability you haven't built yourself. That's fair. And if you slip back into old patterns, I added, I won't fight you. I'll step back. She swallowed. I understand. And for the first time in our lives, that word didn't feel like strategy, it felt like growth. We walked through Millennium Park afterward. Snow crunching under boots. Clouds hanging low over the skyline. We didn't rehash everything. We didn't force emotional breakthroughs. We talked about work. About therapy. About how weird it is realizing your parents are just flawed humans trying their best. Healing wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and steady. On my flight back to Denver, I stared out the window at the clouds and thought about something my therapist once said: you don't have to carry your family's emotional architecture forever. For 5 years, I carried a mortgage. For years before that, I carried invisibility. Now, I was choosing what I carried forward and what I set down. My dad still calls every Sunday at 7 p.m., hasn't missed one. My mom still sends handwritten notes on floral stationery. Madison and I talk twice a month. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's awkward. But it's real, and real is better than perfect. A few months ago, Madison sent me a photo. She'd started her consultancy again, smaller this time. No inflated image, no borrowed credibility, just her. Under the photo she wrote, "Building this one on my own." I smiled. Because that's all I ever wanted for her. Not to lose. Not to shrink. Just to stand without stealing light. People still ask me if I regret not telling my parents from the start. If I'd exposed the truth earlier, would the damage have been smaller? Maybe. Maybe not. But here's what I know now: I didn't pay off that house to win. I did it because it aligned with who I am, and even when the truth hurt, it revealed everyone clearly. Including me. The anniversary party didn't break my family. It revealed it. The legal threat didn't destroy my sister. It exposed her fear. And the Chicago meeting. That's where I decided something powerful. I will never beg to be seen again. Not by my parents. Not by my sister. Not by anyone. If you can't see me, that's your limitation. Not my worth. I used to think being quiet meant being weak. But sometimes the quiet one is the one holding up the house. And sometimes the loud one is just afraid of the dark. I'm not invisible anymore. And I didn't have to shout to prove it. I just had to stop disappearing.